I can still hear the door closing behind him as he left for his business trip that morning. 2 weeks. That's what he said. Just 2 weeks. I think it's funny how something like that can feel like both an eternity and a blink of an eye, depending on how you look at it. I didn't think I'd miss him as much as I did. I mean, I love him. I do. But there's something about having the house to yourself, being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want, that feels liberating for a bit. The first couple of days were fine. I kept busy, work, the usual things. But then, around day 4, I started to feel something else, a kind of emptiness. And that's when I met him. I work at a hospital. It's a small community hospital, but it keeps me busy. I'm a nurse in the oncology department, so my days are filled with the kind of stuff that most people wouldn't even want to think about. But I like it. I feel like I'm making a difference. Anyway, this guy. I'll call him Chris for privacy's sake. He came in for some treatment. Not a regular patient, just a guy who needed to get something done quickly, nothing too serious. He was around my age, late 20s, maybe early 30s, and had this kind of energy about him. You know, that magnetic charm that just makes people look twice. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was focused on my work, doing my rounds, making sure everything was running smoothly. But then I noticed him one morning in the waiting room, a bit early for his appointment. He had this nervous energy about him, like he was trying to play it cool, but failing. And I don't know why, but I walked over to him. I wasn't trying to flirt or anything. I was just trying to be friendly, you know. He was cute, but I was married. It was nothing more than just a moment of awkward small talk. But it was when I said, "You look a little nervous. Everything okay?" That things changed. I swear, he smiled like he was relieved I'd asked. It wasn't just a polite smile, either. It was the kind of smile that makes you feel like you've just been let in on some secret. And then he said, "Yeah, just not my favorite place to be, I guess. But I'll survive. You seem like you know what you're doing, though." It was such a simple thing to say, but there was something in the way he said it that made me feel good about myself. It wasn't intentional, but I caught myself leaning in a little closer, just listening to him. We started talking about work, life, and the usual small talk you'd have with someone you just met. But then, something shifted. He asked me, "You work here full time, or is this just a job for you?" And that's when I realized how much I wanted to talk to him, how much I wanted to be seen in a different light, outside of the routine of my marriage. I felt this almost unconscious desire to be more than just the wife, for once. I said, "Yeah, full time. But I don't mind it, it's a good job. I guess I just feel like I'm helping, you know? Helping's good," he said, leaning back in his chair. His eyes were warm, intense, like he was really listening. And for the first time in a while, I felt like someone was actually seeing me, really seeing me. We exchanged numbers a few days later. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was innocent at first, just talking about work stuff, sharing updates about his condition, nothing more. But after a while, the text turned into something else. Casual at first, then more personal. More meaningful. And here's where I know I'm starting to justify things, but I can't help it. My husband, Mark, he's a good guy. He's busy though. He's a lawyer, always buried in his work, always traveling. I don't know when it started, but somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like I was his priority. He loves me, I know that. But there's a distance between us, something I can't explain. Maybe I started feeling invisible. And then came Chris. He saw me. He didn't just see the nurse, the wife, the person with 100 responsibilities. He saw me. I didn't have to be anyone else with him. And I don't know when it happened. But I started looking forward to those texts. I started wanting to hear from him more. I started thinking about him when I was alone in my bed at night. I wasn't looking for it. But when it happened, I couldn't ignore how alive it made me feel. Even though I knew it was wrong, even though I knew Mark was coming back in a week, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I didn't plan to cross that line, but I kept getting pulled in. To be honest, I didn't even realize it was happening at first. But by the end of the first week, I knew something had shifted. I remember the first time he texted me something that made my stomach do a little flip. It wasn't anything extreme, just a joke about how I must have a million patients to deal with. But something about it felt different. I know, it's crazy, but there was this underlying tension in his words that felt like he was waiting for me to read between the lines. I did, and that's when I realized what was happening. I'd told myself it was just a friendly thing. After all, He was going through his treatment and I was just being a supportive nurse. But slowly, imperceptibly, it started to feel like something else. It wasn't like I was unhappy in my marriage. I had no reason to be, at least not on the surface. Mark and I had built a life together. We had a home, a routine, everything that looked perfect to outsiders. But the truth was, for a long time, I felt like I was living in his shadow. It wasn't that he neglected me. No, he loved me. I knew that. But he was always busy. Too busy for me. Too busy for us. And that's how the distance started to creep in. It wasn't that I didn't love him, or want to make it work, but over time, I'd become a little more invisible in our marriage. Then came Chris. The first few texts were lighthearted, no harm done. But then we started talking about things that were a little more personal. It wasn't like we were talking about our deepest secrets or anything, but the conversation shifted in a way I couldn't ignore. One evening, after a long day at work, I was sitting on the couch at home, waiting for Mark's call. I could hear him in the background of my mind, telling me about all the things he was handling in his office, all the clients he was meeting, all the important things he was doing. The usual. My phone buzzed, and it was Chris. He'd sent me a simple text. "Hope your shift's going okay. I was just thinking about you." My heart skipped a beat. What was that about? I read it again, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't like we were flirting yet. Not really, but there was something more in his words now. Something that felt like an invitation. It wasn't long before the texts became more frequent, and soon we were talking not just during the day, but also late at night. I'd lie in bed after Mark was already asleep, my phone in hand, texting Chris about the day, about life, about anything that popped into my head. I found myself looking forward to those conversations like nothing else. It was silly, but it felt exciting. For the first time in a long while, someone was giving me attention. Attention that wasn't just polite, but real, deep, and, yes, flirtatious. There was this one night that I'll never forget. It was late, probably close to midnight, when he sent me a message that caught me off guard. "You should be careful, you know. If I keep thinking about you like this, I might just do something about it." My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't stupid. I knew what he meant. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks as I stared at the screen, almost embarrassed to acknowledge how badly I wanted to respond, to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, I was ready to take that step. I texted back, "What would you do?" His reply was almost immediate. "I think you know exactly what I'd do. But don't worry, I'll take it slow if that's what you need." I knew that was a challenge. It wasn't just flirtation anymore. He was pushing, testing the waters, seeing if I'd take the bait. And I wanted to. There, I said it, I wanted it. For the first time in a long time, I felt wanted. Not just as a wife, not just as a nurse, but as a woman. So, we kept texting, talking late into the night. And every message, every word from him made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in ages. The thing was, I could still feel the tug of guilt. Mark was coming home in less than a week, and the more Chris and I talked, the more I knew that I was on the edge of something I couldn't come back from. I tried to push the thought of Mark out of my mind, but I couldn't. The guilt didn't stop me, but it sat there in the background, a reminder that I was playing with fire. And then came the day when Chris asked me to meet him in person. It happened casually, almost like it wasn't a big deal at all. He said, "You should grab coffee with me sometime. I'd love to see you outside the hospital, get to know you better." I hesitated for a moment. Meeting him in person felt like crossing a line, but I didn't want to say no. In that moment, I didn't care about the consequences. I didn't care about the guilt. I cared about feeling seen, about feeling desired, about stepping outside my routine and doing something spontaneous. Something that was all mine. So I agreed. We set a date for that Friday, a few days before Mark was due to return. As the days went on, my mind kept circling back to that meeting. I felt a mix of excitement and dread, the thrill of the unknown running through my veins. But there was no turning back now. Friday arrived faster than I expected. I had planned to work that day, but I'd made sure to take the afternoon off. I couldn't keep using the excuse of being busy at the hospital. This was something I had to do. Something I had chosen. I couldn't back out now, even though a small part of me, maybe a bigger part than I cared to admit, was screaming for me to stop. But I didn't. I told Mark I had a meeting at work. Something routine, nothing to be concerned about. He wished me luck, like he always did when I was about to leave for something, And I left the house without a second thought. The drive to the cafe felt surreal, like I was living in a movie, caught between two worlds. On one side, I had Mark, the life I'd built with him, the person I had sworn vows to. On the other, I had Chris, a stranger who had made me feel more alive than I had in years. When I walked into the cafe, I saw him immediately. He was sitting at a corner table, looking casual but somehow more put together than I remembered. His smile when he saw me made my heart skip. He stood up, pulling out the chair for me like we were old friends. Like this was something normal and natural. "Hey," he said, his voice warm. "I'm glad you made it." I sat down, a little nervous but trying to act cool. "I almost didn't," I admitted, laughing nervously. "But I'm glad I did." "Well, I'm glad too," he said, leaning forward slightly. His eyes never left mine, not for a second. There was something about the way he looked at me that made my heart race. It felt intimate. Too intimate for someone I barely knew. We talked about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed easily, and before I knew it, we'd been talking for hours. He was funny, easy to talk to, and so different from Mark. It wasn't that Mark wasn't funny or easy to talk to. It's just that Chris made me feel seen in a way that Mark hadn't in a long time. It felt like every word I spoke mattered. Like he was hanging on to every little thing I said. At one point, the conversation took a more personal turn. "Tell me about your marriage," Chris asked. And I don't know why, but it felt so natural to answer him. I shouldn't have said anything. I shouldn't have been so open, but I couldn't help myself. "It's good," I said, though it felt like an empty answer as the words left my mouth. "It's just routine, I guess. I'm not complaining. It's comfortable. But I don't know, it's just not exciting anymore." Chris nodded, his gaze understanding. "Yeah, I get that. Sometimes things just drift, you know. You get so used to each other that you forget what it's like to be seen." I looked down at my coffee, not sure what to say. The truth was, that's exactly how I felt. I didn't feel seen anymore. Not by Mark. I loved him. But somewhere along the way, it felt like I'd become invisible to him. And I wasn't just talking about the physical stuff, though that had definitely waned over the years. It was more than that. It was emotional distance. The little things that used to matter, the way we used to connect. It was gone. Chris didn't pressure me to talk more than I was comfortable with, but I could tell he was watching me closely. He made me feel like I mattered. Like my words had weight. "Listen," he said after a long pause. "I'm not trying to be forward, but I think you're amazing. You deserve to feel special. You deserve to feel wanted." I swallowed hard, the air between us suddenly thick. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming. But in that moment, I didn't want to pull away. I felt too seen, too wanted. I didn't know if I was ready to let go of my marriage, but I couldn't deny the pull that was growing stronger between Chris and me. He reached across the table, placing his hand over mine. It was gentle at first, but it felt like electricity shot through my veins the moment his skin touched mine. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. "I've wanted to do this for a while," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. His hand was warm, his fingers threading through mine. "But I'm not gonna push you. I just want you to know that I think about you all the time, and I can tell you feel the same." My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath catching in my throat. I knew exactly what he meant, and I couldn't deny it anymore. The attraction was undeniable, and, God, the way he was looking at me made me feel things I hadn't felt in ages. "Chris?" I whispered, my voice breaking slightly as I looked into his eyes. "I don't know if I should be doing this. I'm married." "I know," he said softly, his thumb brushing the back of my hand. "But you're here. And you're with me, and we're talking like this for a reason. We don't always have control over what happens, you know?" He leaned in then, his lips brushing against my ear as he whispered, "I want to kiss Gift." I could feel the heat radiating between us, an undeniable magnetism I couldn't resist any longer. And just like that, I let go. I kissed him. The world around us melted away. Everything except the feel of his lips against mine, the warmth of his body close to mine, and the way he made me feel like I wasn't just someone's wife, but someone. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living. I didn't want to pull away. I wanted more. It's funny how fast things can change. How you can go from being one person, doing one thing, to a completely different reality that feels so much like it was always meant to be. That's how it felt with Chris. After that kiss, after that moment where everything clicked and my mind just went blank, I was swept up in the whirlwind of it all. I remember leaving the cafe, that afternoon feeling like I was in a daze, like everything had shifted and I didn't know how to go back to the way things were. Chris texted me later, saying he couldn't stop thinking about me, and I texted back, "Me too." That was it. The last barrier I had between us, my marriage, had fallen. Mark was coming back the next day. I told myself I would be fine, that I could juggle both sides. I could still keep up the appearances of a loving wife while exploring this new side of myself with Chris. I had no plans to tell Mark. I wasn't ready to confront the reality of what I was doing. It wasn't that I didn't love him, but somehow, at that moment, it felt like I was caught in this new world where everything else seemed irrelevant. When Mark walked through the door, I was almost startled by how normal he looked. His tired eyes, his suit, he was exactly the same. And when he kissed me, when he held me in his arms and asked me how I was, I felt this weird, twisted sense of guilt that hit me like a brick wall. It wasn't even about Chris anymore, or the kiss, or the texts. It was that I had crossed a line. I had chosen someone else over my husband, even if I hadn't fully admitted it to myself yet. "Hey, beautiful," Mark said with a smile, pulling back and taking a good look at me. "You look good. Everything okay? I missed you." "I missed you too," I said, my voice a little shaky. I didn't want him to notice. I didn't want him to see what was going on in my head. Mark looked exhausted, his usual confident demeanor slipping slightly as he dropped his suitcase by the door. We had dinner together that night, just like we always did when he came home from a trip, but the usual comfort of it felt off. He was there, physically. But I wasn't fully there. Not anymore. It wasn't just the guilt. It was the feeling that something had been irreparably broken between us. Every time he touched me, I thought of Chris. Every time we spoke, I couldn't help but compare the way Mark spoke to me to how Chris listened. I was so painfully aware of the way our lives had diverged. Mark was talking about work, about a big case he was handling, and all I could think was, I'm not really here right now. I'm somewhere else. That night, Mark wanted to be close, as he usually did after a long trip. We went to bed, but the intimacy felt like a performance. I wanted to be present, but the desire wasn't there. I wanted to feel connected to him, but instead, I found myself thinking of Chris, of the way he kissed me, of the way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. And then, the next morning, everything came crashing down. I was cleaning the kitchen when Mark came in, his expression suddenly serious. He set down his coffee, his brow furrowing as he glanced over at the counter. I followed his gaze, and I saw it, the second coffee mug. I had meant to put it away before he came home, but in the rush of the last few days I'd forgotten. I didn't even think twice about it until now. "Whose cup is that?" he asked. His voice calm, but there was an edge to it, the kind of edge I knew meant trouble. I froze. My heart started racing. I had no idea how to explain this. "I had a friend over," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could hear the tremble. "A friend from work." His eyes narrowed, and I could tell he wasn't buying it. He didn't say anything for a few long seconds, just looking at the cup, then at me. "A friend," he repeated, his voice low. "I thought you said you were just working while I was away." I swallowed hard, knowing I couldn't keep lying. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when I knew I had made a choice that would change everything. But the truth didn't come out. Not like I thought it would. Instead, it felt like everything inside me was holding it back. I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want to admit the full truth, because once I did, there would be no going back. "Mark, I trailed off, not knowing what to say. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I can't keep doing this, you know. You're always distant lately. I know you. I can tell when something's off. You think I don't notice, but I do. You've been checked out. You've been distant, and now there's a second cup. Who is he, Olivia?" I looked at him, at the man I had promised to love, and felt a pang of guilt so sharp it almost made me sick. But the words felt stuck. My heart was pounding. I wanted to be honest, I really did. But I was terrified. "I'm sorry," I whispered, feeling my throat tighten. He was already shaking his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. "I don't even know what to say anymore. You've been pulling away from me for months, and now this." And then, it all came rushing out. I told him about Chris, how we met, how we started talking, how I let things go too far. I told him everything. Mark just stood there, staring at me as the words spilled out, his face blank. His silence was worse than anything he could have said. When I finally stopped, there was a long moment of stillness between us. Then he turned, walked out of the kitchen, and went to the bedroom. I didn't chase after him. I couldn't. I sat there for a long time, my heart in my stomach, the reality of what I had done settling on me like a weight I couldn't escape. I had betrayed him. I had broken something that wasn't just mine to break. And now, I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if we could ever come back from this. But somehow, I knew that I could never go back to the person I was before. Everything had changed. And I didn't know where it would all go from here.